All right, today on the How to Build series, I'm going to be talking about a shop project, a pretty simple one, on how to build pine beetle picture frames. So come on in. All right, so what I'm doing right now is I've got to go through and source out the best material. So I'm looking at grain, I'm looking at condition, and the key to a lot of this pine beetle and beetle kill type wood is that it can twist and move a lot. And the trick is to find the stuff that's the flattest. I'm actually going through scrap material from a different job. So this actual pine beetle is tongue groove siding. So you can see that. There's the tongue, there's the groove. So it's tongue groove siding used for another project, and I got enough scrap here I can actually do a few of these picture frames. So I got to find the best, flattest, and kind of the coolest looking grain. And if you can see on this stuff too, you know, some of this grain is really, really cool. It's beautiful stuff, but you just got to be careful because it's soft. It likes to twist and move, and you're just going to find the flattest stuff. So step 2 is going to be running it through the table saw, taking off the tongue and the back end of the groove and cutting it down to the size we want. Here we go. All right. Table saw safety real quick. The trick with not cutting your fingers off and being safe with table saws is making sure that the blade height is the right height for the material you're going to rip or cut. So first key is to make sure I've got my tip of my blade just above that wood. So when I rip it, I don't have any kickback or any other issues that come with it. So make sure that you keep the table saw unplugged, size up your blade to the right height of the material you're working with, and then you should be good to go with every other thing running safely. Second point, I'm going to rip off the tongue of this first, and then I'm going to go ahead and run the other end of that wood through the table saw at the width I want. So I'm going to be doing that now. Got those ripped down, got them down to a 3-inch width. So next step I'm going to have here is I'm going to run these through the router table to create my dado cut to set the glass, the picture backing, and obviously the picture itself in there. I do that before I actually cut my miters, because that way it's easier to figure out my dimension for pictures, whether it be 8x10, 4x6, whatever your frame is going to be. So I'm going to show you how I set up my router table. I usually run these dados at a 1/4 inch deep by a 1/4 inch inset from the inside of the material I'm using. So right here, I'm going to grab my combo square. I've already set this, but you can see here that I'm going to check it 1/4 inch off my fence, 1/4 inch. So everything's ready to go. I got my feather board set to help me guide through the back end of the router. And I'm gonna let these things rip. Here we go. All right, ran those through the router table. Got my 1/4 inch dado cut right here. You guys can see that. And I always like to double check, make sure that I wasn't crazy. I'll set that in there. You can see that 1/4 inch. Nice. So generally I can run those through twice, but this pine beetle, it's pretty soft, so I'm not real worried about it. And that edge looks really clean. I don't have any gouges or any tear out or anything that's of worry for these frames. Next point I'm gonna hit is gonna be on the miter cuts to make these 4 pieces for the picture frame itself. So I'm going with an 8x10 today for the picture. I'm gonna make my measurements on my cuts, and then I'm gonna go ahead and run that through the chop saw, and then we're ready to start assembling this thing once those are cut. So here we go. Okay, so a couple tips on how to figure out your actual cuts and your dimensions for these once you cut the miter. So you can see my first piece of cut here. This is going to be, again, an 8x10 frame. So the actual picture size itself is going to be 8x10. So the frame on the front end is going to be bigger than that, obviously, because we've got the back end here that's cut out with that dado cut. And so in order to figure out that distance, I have to measure short point to short point of each one of these pieces, the dimension of the actual picture frame. But I've routed out that back end at 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. So what you have to do is measure on your 4 pieces. You need to cut it a 1/2 inch shorter than the actual dimension, because 1/4 plus 1/4 is 1/2. So in this case, this piece is going to be my 8-inch piece. So I need to actually measure it at 7.5 inches, because I'm going to have 1/4 inch on this end and I'm going to have 1/4 inch on this end. Same thing goes with my 10-inch piece. Sorry, I'm going to have 1/4 inch at the top and 1/4 inch at the bottom on that dado reveal. So I've actually got them measured at 9.5 inches short point to short point. So I'll go ahead and cut these and I'll set it back up and I'll show you how that lays out and show you how those numbers add up together and make a little more sense. All right, one more quick tip as you're cutting these too. You actually don't have to measure every single piece. Once you cut your first 2 pieces, basically your 8-inch and your 10-inch, you can actually use the fence and the first 2 pieces as a template. And what I mean by that is, I got these laid out on my chop saw fence, and what I'll do is I'll just push them up against the fence, both ends, they're nice and tight, and that keeps them flush together on the back. And then I'll actually flush these 2 edges up together, and then I'll just make my mark for the size I'm going to cut. And that way I'm not measuring every single time. If you're doing it, production style, you're making more than one, whatever, this is the easiest way to do it. It saves a lot of time and saves a lot of measuring and a little bit of mishap if you're not quite using your tape measure. And again, this is a pretty simple carpentry project that was the way I'm going to show you how to do it. So anyway, quick tip on how to just measure those quickly once you get your first 2 pieces cut width and length. So I got my 4 pieces cut, and I'll show you real quick. Got everything laid out here on the table. So you can see what I was talking about taking that 1/2 inch off short point to short point, because when you flip them over and you've got your edge on the back, your dado cut, that gives you 8 inches by 10 inches on an 8x10 frame. And that's how you figure out your dimension. So if it's a 4x6, you'd be 3.5 by 5.5 on your depths for your short point to short point cut on the miter saw. So hopefully that makes more sense now that you can see it. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, on these, I like to run a biscuit joint on these edges to glue them up. And that gives a nice strong hold. And it, again, prevents some of this pine beetle from running to twist any more than it's going to, especially before I sand everything down and then give it a seal. So the important point here is that I want to go ahead and get this glued up before I actually seal everything up and sand it, because it's easier to sand everything once it's in place. So that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to get this set up for the biscuit joiner, and I'll show you guys how to do that. Okay, what I'm doing now is I've actually dry fit the 4 pieces together, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark the exact location I want to do each biscuit joint. So what I end up doing here, and we'll see if this can show up on camera, is I'll put everything together, and then I'll make my little line, which is the middle of where my biscuit joiner is going to go, which will line up with the line on my biscuit joiner here. There's my location. That's my reference point when I make my joint for every single piece. And then I'll number them. So these pieces go back together. You can see there 1 and 1. That way, if there's any tiny little imperfection, or if this board wants to move just slightly, I know those two angles are going to go together, just in case it's like a, you know, a quarter of a degree off or something like that. Nothing's perfect in carpentry even, so that helps me reference every piece. Next thing I'm going to do is set it up on the table here, and I'm going to make my joints, and we're almost done. We can glue it up after that, so watch. All right, as you can see, there's my biscuit joint to accept the biscuit. And if you notice, I was actually running that thing through every single time twice to make sure I got a clean cut. So now we're gonna grab our glue. We're gonna grab our biscuits, make some biscuits, as my wife says. I'm gonna use the number 10s on these. Number 10. Just the depth I want and the width that I want for this type of picture frame. So what I'll do is I'll end up laying these out and glue everything up. Obviously I'm gonna glue the biscuit in, but I'm also gonna glue the edge together. And then all my cuts are right, everything should lay pretty flat. I may have to clamp up a couple things just to hold it nice and tight, let it set up for a while, and then it's off to sanding and staining, and you guys yourself a picture frame. So I'll get everything glued up. You guys can see the end result of this. Biscuits, glue. Ruh-roh. Got a massive hole in this now. Trying to make a mess. Glue up that. Glue up the other side. Alright, so I just took clamps off and did a quick sand with some 220 grits with a random orbital sander. Everything turned out pretty good. You can see got some good pine beetle grain pattern on both sides here. And everything's set up, ready to go. I'm going to do probably 2 coats of polyurethane. I usually just do a clear. And then off to the local picture frame company. They cut my glass for me, and it's all done. I got to put a little 1/8 inch backer in the back of these, and then I set little tabs and screws in just like you see on any picture frame, and it's ready to go. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, check out the other videos, and see you next time. Thanks guys.